Hey y'all, this is Mo.
And I'm Joy.
We are lifelong friends who met in kindergarten and reconnected in Catholic school when we were 12. We are Christian women who enjoy travel, making art, cooking, baking, reading, and gardening. We do our very best to practice holistic health, and we love America. So pull up a chair and grab a hot tea, coffee, or chai latte and enjoy the show.
Today's job market is different from other times in history. Job seekers face a rapidly evolving workforce with changes in technology, generational attitudes, and even interfaces with AI. Our podcast will offer analysis, real-life examples, interviews, and discussions. We will explore solutions for the current workforce that is impacted by layoffs or just wanting to make a change. And we'll do it while having a laugh or two. Welcome to Real Talk for Today's Job Seekers podcast. Well, welcome back, everyone. We have a very special podcast interview for you today with Steve Jaffe. He's the author of The Layoff Journey From Dismissal to Discovery. Steve, welcome to the podcast. We're happy to talk with you and share your book with our listeners.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So, Steve, I noticed that you dedicated your book to your wife and credited her support in helping you transform your setbacks into opportunities. You know, I've learned myself that it is so important to have the support of your spouse if you are married, or the support of a solid network if you are not. You know, after receiving the invite to meet you and discuss your book, I'll admit I took some time to look through your LinkedIn profile. You know, I had to get a little bit of high level.
Cyber stalked you.
No, not super stalked, but I think it's really important to get a little bit of professional, high level info. I saw that you enjoyed a 25-year career in marketing and advertising. It looks like you were a full-time employee, FTE, as well as a consultant. In 2023, you were able to begin to realize the long-held dream of becoming an author. So would you share how that opportunity appeared for you to fulfill that dream?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me on. I think it's interesting. You started the question with the dedication to my wife, and then we landed on kind of the beginning of the writing journey. And, I credit her because she knew that I had a lifelong dream of writing a book, and she was very, very encouraging. Also, she was by my side for all four of my layoffs and was very encouraging for those as well. She gave me the comfort and support that I needed, but also at times kind of the kick in the butt that I needed too. So I do feel like I wouldn't have been able to get through all of those experiences without her love and support, but I also wouldn't have been able to fulfill this goal of writing a book without her love and support too. So yeah, I can't tell my story without giving her some gratitude.
Yeah, I really appreciated that because I myself have had a lot of support from my husband. And then I know Joy and I have been able to talk so much through this as well. And then, of course, all of us that have been laid off have kind of our network of people, right? And you tend to kind of huddle together for a little bit to get you through the bumps and the bruises until you safely land in the next spot. So I personally appreciated the dedication to your wife, and that spoke to me. So I wanted to just call that out.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. I know she does as well.
So we'll start off kind of at a high level with some of the book's themes. And in the book, you start off with some interesting statistics that I just want to go over here real quickly. You say that layoffs have been steady on the rise, and these days it's not if layoffs occur, but when they'll occur. Your research shows that in 1979, the Fortune 100 companies, fewer than 5% of them had layoffs. Come 1994, 45% of them did. Then in 2008, 2010, kind of with that aftermath of that recession, a survey shows that 65% of the companies were resorting to layoffs. And the most interesting statistic to me was in 2022, post COVID and all of its impacts, over 17 million people were laid off. And that, if you look at it, that's approximately 13% of the American workforce. The wonderful thing about your book is that it aims to help people navigate the experience of being laid off and to see it as a temporary setback, not as a life-altering judgment on their abilities, their character, or the possibility of gaining future employment. Steve, could you speak to that further, more of the why of the book?
Yeah. So I think for me, the statistic that stands out the most is that 40% of all Americans have been laid off at least once. And I think if people knew that number and knew just how many people that they probably know that have been laid off, but just don't talk about it. There's a shame and embarrassment that comes with a layoff that keeps all of us from sharing and talking and reaching out to our networks for support. And I think one of the things that I hope the book does is help dispel some of that shame and embarrassment. Typically, a layoff is a no-fault termination, meaning there's nothing that you did wrong. You happen to be on the wrong side of the ledger when they're looking at driving revenue to the bottom line, and layoffs are the quickest way of doing that. I've seen employee of the year get laid off. And oftentimes I've seen the most mediocre, average, sometimes underperforming employee stay. So there's no rhyme or reason. But if you start to dispel some of the shame and embarrassment, you also are able to understand that this isn't this like declarative statement on your self-worth, and that you shouldn't feel badly about yourself. It won't have the same effect on your self-esteem. So the premise of the book begins with my first layoff, which was in the spring of 2001. I was living in San Francisco, working at an ad agency, very successful. The agency was great. The client was great. We were winning awards. We were increasing sales and revenue. All of the metrics that you look for, we were achieving. I had just gotten married, and it was literally and figuratively the springtime of my life. The client went through a severe budget issue and ended up going bankrupt. And it was part of the whole dot-com bubble that burst in 2001. And I got laid off. And that layoff really, really affected me. It took me a long time to recover. Fast forward summer 2023, it's my fourth layoff. And I sail right through it. It's not an issue for me. And I look and I reflect and I realize that the stages of grief as I came to understand them were something that I had navigated so many times. I had learned a certain set of skills that it didn't have the same effect on me. And that was the impetus for this book. I wanted to translate that life learning and that experience to help others so they could navigate their layoff in months rather than years.
Yeah, some of those emotions really resonated with me so much. I think I share your journey of kind of processing the layoffs themselves more in that manner. What's been really interesting for me is that I'm kind of battling some of those emotions as a job seeker
Yeah.
following my last layoff, which was, let's see, wow, we are quickly approaching a year now. For me, it was such a shock to realize how different the job search market really is. And then I actually thought it was a joke at first, this whole idea of ghost job postings.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that kind of actually propelled some of mine and Joy's initial discussions about my own job search experiences earlier this year. Steve, are you familiar with ghost job postings?
Oh yeah, 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 totally, totally. And here's the thing is after you've been laid off, you have the grief of your layoff. And then once you enter the job market, you're submitting job applications and going on interviews, you have the added grief of, you submit 100 resumes, you don't hear back, you go on job interviews, you think they go well, you don't hear back, the fake job postings, all of the ghosting that happens. You find a job you like and you realize there's like 500 or 1,000 people that have also applied to that job. Like,
Yes.
that's one of the reasons why after a layoff, it's really important to manage that grief, because if you don't, you're going to have the compounding grief of your layoff plus the difficulty of the job search. I think that's one of the things in the book is the tools and the guide. And at the end of each chapter, there's a short exercise. All of it
Yes.
prepares you for like resilience and grit and tenacity. So whatever it is that you're facing, whether it's a layoff or a ghosting, you've built some internal fortitude to manage those challenges.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that and the exercises and trying to keep everything in perspective because the longer the job search goes on, the more challenging that can be. So, yes, you definitely need to have peace with that layoff. Definitely agree with that. And there's definitely valuable exercises that you put at the end of each chapter. So, let's go ahead and jump into the book. I'm going to do a little bit of quoting in a couple of these sections, and I really love the way that you describe certain things. Obviously, there was some humor.
Mm.
Those of us that have already been through it, like I definitely laughed out loud on a few of the chapters, and then a couple I was just like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." But so stage one for you starts with denial.
Mhm.
So let's kind of jump into this phase, and I'm going to quote a little bit from the book, a couple of specifics. So the first thing you'll feel is the shock of realizing you have no control over the unfolding situation. Janice in Human Resources may give you a reason, but she's not required to do so. Maybe you didn't even meet with Janice. Perhaps you received an email that began with, "We regret to inform you, dot, dot, dot." Further
Mhm.
on, you say about your first layoff experience. As you entered the conference room, it was as solemn as a funeral, sad and concerned faces, brief sentences, long pauses. The client was cutting their budget. The agency was cutting staff. Today was the last day. Cobra. Severance. Please clean out your desk immediately. Thank you for your service. I literally, when I was reading that first stage, was visualizing and feeling the things because I had seen some of that myself. It it just brings it all back to a degree, if you've had that experience. It is so true, believe it or not. Some people are actually surprised that Janice doesn't have to give you a reason, but
Mm.
those are the
Yeah.
facts, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of a lighthearted question, but I laughed with your name choice. Was Janice just a random name, or is that tied to someone?
No, no. So if you haven't read the book, Janice is our like ubiquitous person from HR that always shows
Yeah.
up. So after 4 layoffs, some in person, some over Zoom. Yeah, so Janice is like the ubiquitous representative from HR that's always present. And over 4 layoffs, some in Zoom, some in person, you
Mm.
always have that person. It's usually a female. And so I decided to make Janice the through line that constantly shows up. That's there to give you your paperwork and talk to you about severance. And
Yeah.
she's the person that you see on your first day of work and usually the last day of work. No significance to her name,
Okay.
but you always have that ever-present representative from HR delivering the bad news.
Absolutely. Well, and it gives a little bit of humor, right, to the situation, especially for someone who's maybe not as far along on their journey of processing, I do think that that gives a little bit of humor, for the person
Yeah.
reading your book. That was humorous. I will definitely say that. We got some giggles. So, Joy and I shared our own layoff stories early on in this podcast in some detail. Joy, your first and only layoff was a surprise as well. How does that description that you read from Steve resonate with you?
It was, and I related to the world turning on its axis
Mm,
description. I felt it. I cleaned out my desk. I got the Cobra speech.
mm,
I had to
mhm.
hand off all the tasks really quickly with tears flowing and all the things. I was,
Aw,
Yeah. It's
aw,
really emotional. It's a difficult thing. I don't know if you had to do it while security looked over your shoulder, but a lot of
oh,
times
yeah.
you'll clean out your desk and they'll have security and make sure you're not taking anything that you're not supposed to take.
right, right,
And if you ever work in an open office, an open floor plan, you're
right.
doing this in front of the entire office. It's the most
Yes.
humiliating thing. And I
Yes.
mean, it's super scarring. It's awful.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. It made me remember something from over 20 years ago. I had moved from one of I'm not going to call it a satellite building, but it wasn't the main building, right, of my company. And it was where the bulk of our city's technology was housed. We also had an entire technology unit out in another state. It was such a big deal because a couple of key developers who had been there a long time got let go. And it was the only time that I had ever seen our security officer be present because I
Hmm.
guess they were concerned about the response
Hmm.
from the person. Man, you know what? I never forgot that.
Yeah.
Never. Another thing that really jumped out to me in this phase was the statement that you mistakenly thought hard work and success would be rewarded to some degree, right, with job security. That experience, namely the layoff, would expose that myth and many others. Steve, while Joy and I were not in the advertising space, we can certainly say that all of these sentiments rang true in our industry, which is financial services. And we did quickly learn that job security did not look anything like it did for our grandparents, and in some cases, our own parents.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think I mentioned I had a really difficult time processing that first layoff, and that was
Yeah,
one of the reasons. I was successful. I was doing good work. The client was happy. Everybody was happy. And yet you think, well, I work hard, and in return, I'll get a promotion, a raise, whatever. You never think that the result would be that you would get laid off. And
Right,
you
right.
try and find answers. And that's one of the things with Janice is you're not going to get answers from her, and you're never really ever going to get answers. And you have to kind of let go of the desire or the need to find an answer outside of yourself. And you need to understand that really there was nothing you could have done. You may have worked very hard and it didn't work out the way you had wanted it to, but it was no fault of your own. And what's difficult in this is I call this the myth of meritocracy. In meritocracy, you have hard work plus IQ, high IQ equals success. And what you realize is that in the workplace, it's not always hard work and being smart enough. Sometimes it's who do you know? Who are you friends with? What are the politics at play?
yeah,
I've seen the most successful people at jobs, people who were held up as like the employee of the year, get let go, while people who were disengaged, underperforming,
yeah.
pretty mediocre, they keep their jobs. And there's no way you're ever going to be able to make sense of that. It's a slippery slope that won't help you in the journey from recovering from your layoff that you have to let go of. Coming to terms with finding your own purpose outside of that is really important.
That'll teach.
Yes.
But I will say, like, there is a part of me that misses the days of company loyalty and gold watches, you know.
Yeah, that's long gone. No, it's every man or woman for himself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I laughed when I heard Joy talking about the gold watches. I was like, gold watches? Like, was that a thing? That was
yeah,
new on me.
yeah.
But last thing that I really and forgive me because I know I'm reading a little bit, but there were a few things that just were so on point, right? This chapter really spoke to me so much. You said there is no good way to get laid off, that you had been laid off in person by caring and compassionate people, laid off over Zoom by folks that didn't seem to care very much. That was my last go around. I've heard of people getting laid off via email, employees being laid off on vacation or while on FMLA, women being laid off mid pregnancy or even while in labor, sales reps having their credit cards shut off mid business trip without notice. Rude.
Hmm.
Sometimes they just shut the computer off or deactivate your key card days before Christmas or holidays, or even the more exciting, watching it on the news.
Hmm.
When I considered those examples that you laid out, I was like, dang, I got off pretty easy. I certainly agree that there's really no easy way to get laid off unless you're at a particular point in your life where you welcome it. And that could be a family need, or you're this close to retirement. So you're cool with that, right? For me, where I land is that it's always better to avoid the pure shock factor variety of layoff. Joy, we've talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah, and the Tesla and Twitter layoff stories that Steve references in the book were
Yeah.
terrible. You know,
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mo and I discussed the meta scenario in our sixth episode of the podcast, and
Hmm.
that's where Meta had cut about 5% of its workforce,
Hmm.
and they publicly stated that they were cutting the low performers.
Yeah.
And one
Wow.
employee said, you know, it felt like I had a scarlet letter on my back,
Hmm. Hmm.
that they were not underperformers. Steve, it sounds like you heard about this. What are your thoughts about a company making such a public statement like that?
Oh, I think it's awful. I don't. I can't imagine what the benefit was of saying that. It is, and here's the thing. I think there was like 14,000 people that were affected by that layoff, and there is no way imaginable there were 14,000 underperformers. There are so many things that go into performance, like who's your boss? How are they measuring success? What are the success metrics clear? Are they well defined? Like there's so many things that go into this for them to put that out there. I don't understand it, and it's uh, that would be if you were laid off under those circumstances, and
Yeah.
and that would probably be one of the worst.
Right, right,
Yep.
right. I agree. We're going to go ahead and move to the next stage, which is stage two, pain. And you
Hmm.
tell your story about your second layoff. Can you tell us a little bit about that now, where you kind of walked in and
Oh boy. Gosh. Yeah. That was a tough one.
not that we want to regale things, but
No,
yeah, go ahead.
no. So I had a meeting with my boss. I had arrived early for the meeting, and his door was open, and so I could hear the meeting that was going on before mine. And I heard him speaking to a woman, and I heard him say something to the effect of, you know, she asked, "Well, how do you think he's going to take it?" He said, "Oh, he'll be fine. This happens all the time in business. It's nothing personal. He'll understand." Not too long after, he called me in the office, and I see him, and lo and behold, there's Janice from HR, and I realize, oh shit, they were talking about me. I know what's coming next, and there's the folder with the Cobra and the severance and the whole thing. He had the organization had a changeover in leadership at the president level, and when the new president came in, they brought in all of their senior executives that over time then brought in all of their folks from their prior organization. So I had been at that company a very long time and had watched them go through this list. And my name in that instance happened to be last on the list because everybody else in the department had already gotten their walking papers. So it was this, again, outside my control. He was trying to, I write in the book, kind of reform this band that had broken up because of the prior organization. They got disbanded. They came over here and were reuniting everybody. So, but the difficulty there was by him saying, this goes on every day and he'll be fine, created this really weird dynamic where I needed to kind of comply with this business politeness almost. Like I needed to sit there and like take it because that was the social construct. And these days, so much of the job market is based on who you know. It's based on networking. There's a whole hidden job market that never makes it onto job posts.
Yep.
And if you want to gain access to that, you need to leave under positive terms. So while you would love to be able to give everybody a piece of your mind and say, this is total bullshit. You've gotten rid of the entire team and we were all great people just so you could reunite these old people that you work with. One is a cliche, and two shows complete disregard for these people's lives, livelihoods. But you can't say that. You have to smile and nod and be complicit in this social, game. And so that you could leave on good terms and later you could reach out to that person and say, hey, I know it was nothing personal. Do you know anybody that's looking to hire? Right. Mm-hmm. And otherwise you lose that opportunity. So it's part of that whole dynamic and that game that's difficult, but unfortunately you have to play.
That's funny. When you just said nod, it cued one of my husband's favorite things that he likes to say, and it's super annoying, but it's nod, it goes faster. And it's so like applicable to this scenario, but that just popped into my mind. And, I think you had said on that particular layoff that you were the last man standing. And that also spoke to me because my first layoff, that was kind of my scenario as well. The way that you captured it across the board, in the entire book really is just so relatable.
Thank you. Yeah. Look, I've been first on the list and wondered, oh my gosh, like, why was I first? What does that mean? Yeah. And you try and read into that. And I've been last on the list. And what I learned from the experience is you can't read anything into either one of them. It doesn't mean anything. You just luck of the draw. And a lot of these things, when you have these questions that you're not going to get answered, you just have to let go of and find peace in not knowing the why.
One of my best traits when I was younger was unflappability. I learned it because of having a mother that had some mental issues or whatever, but you don't react, you don't show emotion. But I tell you, as I've gotten older, my filter has gotten a little frayed, and it would be much harder not to at least growl at Janice. But let's continue and wrap up the pain chapter here with the last section that I'd like to highlight, the loss of working relationships. Yeah. You'd like to think that your pal Harvey is going to call you after you leave, but he's not. You might get a text once a year on your birthday, but no calls, no coffee. And you summed it up so well when you said you may remain friends with a few of them, but the common bond that you share about the trials and tribulations of the job no longer exists. Yeah. So, Steve, can you talk further to the loss of work friendships?
Yeah, a lot of times when you're laid off, you think that the loss of the paycheck is going to be the one that hits the hardest, and it is. But the loss of those work relationships, those friends, that can sometimes hit just as hard. these are people that you worked with, maybe spent more time with than your family.
Yeah.
Became close. You created a bond. You were in the foxhole together. And when things at work got difficult, these were people that you turned to and you would commiserate with and share the experience, and they would be your support network. And now here you are dealing with a really difficult work experience, and it's going to be difficult to turn to them. That project that you were working on that now you're not going to be able to finish, guess what? That's their project now that they have to finish in addition to all of their work. And they have survivor guilt and they have all this
Yeah.
stuff that they're carrying. It's difficult to hang on to those.
Mhm.
Some of them you may need to let go of, and some of them you may need to find like that the new commonality of what does your relationship become if it's not based on work and the work projects that you shared and those at work experiences. And some may remain, but some you may need to let go of. And that's difficult because it was something else that was taken from you involuntarily. You would have loved to be able to hold on to them, but when you were walked out the door because of no fault of your own, you lose those relationships as well. That can be really, really difficult.
100%. I have personally never worked with a Harvey. I don't know why, but I get so into like the names that people pull out. But you are so right. With my first layoff, granted it had been 3 companies. At the end of the day, I left with an 18-year tenure.
Mm,
And there was a lot of sentiment across the board, even though, in fact, I was one of the last men standing. I had to deal with so many of my peers and a few of my close friends that I absolutely did do life with because, when you add travel, that adds a whole nother layer to the relationships and the friendships. And, I wound up writing a 1 page, half-inch margin, single spaced kind of goodbye letter. And I literally just kind of outlined a lot of the memories and the
mhm,
relationships. And you're right. Some of those you have to let go because you realize you don't have anything in common. But the ones that have the special relationships, like I still have a group from that 18-year span layoff, which has now been some time back. We still do a little bit of life. So those things are
mhm,
nice. You don't necessarily consider those personal relationships until after the fact and you realize you've had a couple of uncomfortable interactions and you're like, oh, I'm not really going to do that anymore. But
mhm,
it's a real part of it, right?
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
So let's move into stage 3, negotiation. You noted it's similar to how people cling to the hope of reconciliation after a breakup.
Hmm.
At its core lies a deep natural desire to maintain control over an uncontrollable situation. Wow, that definitely rings a bell and stings a little. I think for me, I have definitely experienced more of struggling with a lack of control in the job search. For
Hmm.
me, I think I have personally found this experience to be way worse than my
Hmm.
2 layoffs.
Hmm.
The one key thing I did not want to miss were these specifics. And I was so interested in the fact that you called this out because of a conversation Joy and I had earlier this year. And I was just so shocked. And you've now normalized it.
Hmm.
But you noted in here, while the separation from your job is unfortunately not negotiable, the terms of your release can be negotiated. You said we negotiate our hiring agreements. Why not our separation agreement? Severance pay, health coverage, equipment, references, and referrals could all possibly be on the table. If this is the case, keeping your wits about you is essential. Absolutely. Too often, when it's time to walk through the layoff process, people tend to agree or sign something the moment it's presented. You said to move past the pain, but that's part of it, but there's also the part of just you're completing the steps and walking through their process,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Joy, share with Steve our conversation that blew my mind a couple months ago that ties to this directly.
Yeah, in our third episode, I shared with Mo and our listeners about a friend who had negotiated a severance and he was successful in doing it. Mo was caught off guard by the concept and you normalize it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had personal experience with it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Or-
I think it comes from my background in advertising and media and marketing, which everything is kind of negotiable. And I always will ask for, in a whether it's like a promotion or a raise, I'll always try and advocate for myself. And I've been able to in severance agreements negotiate a few things like in the book I mentioned I was able to keep a laptop. I've been able to negotiate some other terms. But I think it's something that people don't all understand or are comfortable with as well. I think for some, and I
Correct.
mentioned this, like for some fields, if you're in sales, you're used to negotiating everything. If you come from finance, which is a little bit more like black and white, you
Yes.
don't negotiate, right? So it's not
Yeah.
top of mind. Yeah, what I think the secret that most people don't realize is that when HR puts the severance on the table, it's
Hmm.
like just their first offer, and it's usually like a low ball offer. There's room in there, right? If you find yourself in a situation where like your health insurance is really important because you have medical needs, by all means, negotiate the health coverage that you need to bridge the gap till your next employer. If you are like an immigrant and your visa status is tied to your employment, negotiate different visa terms. People have done that and they've been successful. Assessing your situation to determine your needs and then going to that now former employer and making the case for why you'd like to ask for that bridge is probably more common than people think, and you probably would be more successful than you would think if you were to approach it. And this is also the reason why in those early stages it's important to kind of bite your tongue and go along to get along, because when
Yeah.
it comes time to negotiate this, you're going to want to have some goodwill on your side.
Gosh, y'all,
That's
I
a good
don't even
point.
like to go to garage sales if they don't have the prices on stuff. I leave because I can't handle it. I can't handle the
Hmm.
pressure. But yes, I think we all need to get better at negotiations, especially us from the banking background.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe I was just under the false impression that, and who knows, there could be state rules. Who knows? There's so much that goes into all of this, but I guess it had just never honestly occurred to me, Steve, that that was an option, and I will definitely reconsider that. And I hope that your readers will gain from that. I even threw out to Joy, I was just like, an interesting thought would be not so much just the people who would, this book would resonate with who have actually been laid off, but I'm thinking about what type of value that your book would have for college graduates who
Yeah.
are going into the job market, right? And obviously, when you're starting out, you're green and you don't know what you don't know, right? And
Hmm.
I feel like that's kind of another avenue to maybe assist new people going into the job market who probably have not even necessarily considered
Yeah.
dealing with a layoff, but it was just something that kind of, popped up in my mind.
You're totally right. You're totally right. And what I found was that one of the reasons I wrote the book, the last layoff that I went through, there's about 20% of the company that was laid off along with me. And there
Mm.
were people that were laid off that were very young, very early in their career, and maybe this was their first time. And
Ouch.
I wanted to take like my 25 years of experience and distill it in a way that I could give them that kind of like practical guide as
Yeah.
like this education tool to say, okay, here's everything that you're facing and you're going through.
Hmm.
Here's what I went through. Here's how I got through it. I think this could help because nothing prepares you for it and nothing like when you're young and early in your career, like I mistakenly thought, oh, you know what? If I work hard and I'm smart enough, I'll be successful. And
Yeah.
then you have this dose of reality that says, oh, no, you know what? That's really, there's a lot more at play than that. Giving folks that information early in their career sure would save a lot of pain.
Absolutely. And before we move on to the next stage, let me just say that you read my mind with this next sentence.
Mm.
Okay. Also likely, the compulsion to dissect the various ways that you could have been more efficient, the need to reevaluate the interactions with senior management, the inclination to regret the times that you were late or called in sick, and the urge to scrutinize every perceived shortfall.
Mm-hmm.
That's my response. Overthinking things when it likely has nothing to do with me. And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
summed it up as, oh, you're efficient. Oh, you're effective. Oh, F it already.
Right,
You know?
right, right. I think that's what's interesting about this chapter on negotiation is there is the literal negotiation of like your severance agreement, but there's also this like negotiation and bargaining that goes on within yourself where you're thinking a lot about what could I have done?
Hmm.
What did I do wrong? What if I had done this instead of that? And that's that losing battle that you're just going to have a loop in your head that you're never going to get out of because there's no answers, right? And the outcome would have been the same regardless. So, what I suggest is to move from what if to what's next.
Yeah.
To instead of obsessing over if only I had, to reframe your focus to the future possibilities. And that's where you start to turn this layoff into an opportunity for discovery and for transition, maybe for a new beginning. And that shift to what if to what's next is one of the pathways into turning this into an area of opportunity.
So we'll go ahead and go to the next stage, number 4, which is depression. It's a tough, unpredictable emotion overall to deal with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This was one I think I struggled with the most. And in the book, I talk a lot about like a whole body experience, mind, body, spirit, and taking care of like some simple things, but will give you the strength that you need to get through this difficult time. So get plenty of sleep, eat a really good, nutritious diet, get plenty of exercise, practice mindfulness, practice a positive mindset, a gratitude practice. Those are things that you can do every day that will keep depression at bay. Self care, mental health is really, really important. If you get down that slippery slope of a layoff, as it can affect your self esteem, your self image, you can go through a really difficult time. So, something like exercise, for example, you're releasing a lot of natural chemicals like dopamine, serotonin,
Yeah.
that are your body's way of battling the chemicals from depression. I recommend limiting alcohol intake. Alcohol is a depressant in itself, and that
For
can only
sure.
exacerbate depression. So,
Yep.
there are things that you can do to counterbalance, counteract some of these stages and give yourself a real good fighting chance of getting through them without a lot of setbacks.
Yeah, there was a Yale study that you referenced that found essentially that unemployment was followed by frustration and disorganization, and people felt like they had lost their usefulness.
Mm-hmm.
With the job, the worker had somewhere to go each morning, a rhythm to the day, but without work, this rhythm just disappeared and was replaced by drifting.
Yeah. 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 It's important to set up a new routine to replace the routine that you lost. So, whatever works for your body clock and how you best work, get up at a reasonable hour, start the day right, start it off with a positive affirmation, maybe something healthy, maybe some protein, some exercise, establishing a new routine is really important for structure, and that's a great tool as well.
Yeah, that daily rhythm and drifting spoke to me. I absolutely have had to create purpose for myself since my most recent layoff. And the new rhythm was obviously very different. I'm definitely still challenged at times, and exercise and prayer have definitely been a big part. And it's funny because I had a friend get laid off just about, well, I think it'll be 5 months this week. And she and I try to meet, like, I don't know, every month or so, and we do what we call a walk and talk,
Mhm.
where we get in some extra exercise and we just get caught up on everything. And of course, job searching is a big topic. Last time we met, it jumped out to me, especially after reading your book, that she was frustrated with how her days are passing.
Mhm.
And she's like, I don't know where the time goes.
Mhm.
And then I thought about Joy, who's kind of been on a soft retirement for 4+ years now. So, Joy, can you describe how you landed in a good spot yourself?
Have I landed in a good spot? I guess I have lately, but for a while I was really lost. And before I continued that answer, Steve, you also said something that I really connected to in this chapter. My devotion to the job during my waking hours had meant the slow death of my relationships, my hobbies, my
Mm.
interests, and my life outside of work. It hadn't just become my career identity, I had made it my sole identity. And that resonated with me because I too had made work my sole identity at the peril of the relationships and outside interest.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, for me, there was a lot of avoidance entertainment because I wasn't sure what to do with myself. But I started focusing more on the things that mattered, repairing the rusty relationships, working on my health, my spiritual walk, and the stuff that matters. And I started thinking more in line of what things can I do now so that the 5 year older me or the 10 year older me is a better overall version of the
Mhm.
current me.
Mhm.
Steve, like, how did you find your rhythm?
I think like I think I probably started off a little bit lost, like in the first layoff, and didn't quite have a firm grasp of what would be a healthy approach to managing my time. But then, after my fourth layoff, I had learned these skills, and I learned how important it is to, maintain a routine. So like now, those things that I mentioned are non-negotiables. I do those every day, and they're my baseline. And what I have found now that they have helped me not only overcome the challenges of a layoff, but any challenge that I face in my life, that baseline gives me what I need to approach it in like a healthy, mindful way. So I work every day at one, keeping depression at bay, but two, maintaining like just a general healthy lifestyle and a healthy routine, because I've seen how much it helps. And I love your future looking, look at yourself in 5 years and determine where you want to be, and create that path today. That's a great exercise. Thanks for sharing.
So I love that you said the best way to battle depression and sadness is by pursuing joy.
Mm.
Obviously, over the years, there's lots of corny joy jokes that Joy and I do back and forth with each other. Her name appears on a wide variety of things. And it's just so true, though, because there is something about pursuing joy. And so, for any readers or listeners that are wondering what the big deal about that is, I would encourage them to learn a little bit more about the true meaning of joy and what that stems from. Furthermore, you encouraged your readers to identify what fills their cup, what
Mhm.
recharges your batteries, what are the things you can do to just become a better you and to keep moving forward. And I just think not only are those healthy practices for this particular scenario in terms of layoffs or job search or whatever it is, but that's just a very good life practice.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yep. So we are moving to stage 5, acceptance. You compare your first layoff and your last layoff, and we kind of touched on it a little bit already, but you talk about your mindset being so different. And you said that you felt like the first layoff was a huge personal failure.
Hmm.
How you feel like this last layoff was just redirection.
Hmm.
Do you have anything else to add to talking about that mindset change further?
I think the acceptance stage is the beginning of like the light at the end of the tunnel. So if you go through denial and anger and bargaining and depression, those are some dark days and really take a lot out of you. Acceptance and then reconstruction and renewal, you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You start to see maybe that transformation is possible. You start to see and maybe experience some resilience. Ultimately, I think this is where you take control of your next chapter and you redefine success on your own terms. So, one of the things that I say is that a layoff doesn't define you, what you do next does. So, you start to put this in the rear view mirror and you start to look forward. And that's an important pivot. Absolutely. Accept what's happened, put it behind you, move forward. Sometimes that's easier said than done. But hopefully, with the tools and the techniques that I write about in those previous chapters, it positions you to accept things for what they are.
Well said. So we have 2 stages left. Let's walk through these last two. Stage 6 is reconstruction. I like the analogies used for the most part across the board in the book, but this ancient Greek myth
Mhm.
about the legendary ship of the hero. So is it Theseus? I'm not really sure. We were debating that. But I actually was not familiar with that particular legend, kind of summarizing the overall myth, because you got to leave something for the readers to want to go out and,
Mhm.
like, experience them for
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm.
But you said experiencing a layoff can feel like losing key components of your identity, which is
Mhm.
absolutely true.
Mhm.
And in terms of the myth, it's much like this particular ship's planks that were replaced and the reasons behind that. So
Yeah.
your job may have been a core part of who you were personally, professionally, obviously financially, right? But in the reconstruction stage, you also begin to replace the planks, so to speak, of your life. So
Mhm.
I would encourage listeners, don't miss the myth. It's really, it's just the perfect analogy just across the board.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. And
Yeah.
Janice showed back up on the scene too, didn't she?
Yeah. Janice is back. Welcome back, Janice.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so Janice, and you had said it's more likely that Janice won't even see the resume. She will likely run it through an applicant tracking system, which I'll admit ATS was a different acronym for me. And you said, hey, if you're unfamiliar with ATS, it's an AI enabled software system where resumes go to die. So I would say that that statement really does kind of resonate with the foundation of how this podcast was founded. It started out as a joke, honestly, because if you would have thought that Joy or I would have pursued something like this and putting ourselves out there in this manner, I think we both would have laughed and kept it moving. But that is definitely the whole AI thing. I'm just going to go and say, ATS is the sibling, or at minimum, the cousin to ghost job postings.
Mm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot wrong with the hiring system and HR right
Amen.
now, and
Amen.
I think ATS opens the door, and
Mhm.
everything else just followed. It's not a great time for the human resources industry. And the ironic thing is, through ATS and now the use of AI, they've kind of taken the human part out of human resources.
Oh my gosh, we've said that. That you're literally quoting some of the things we've discussed because it is looking for a job in my own personal experience, whether it be blindly
Hmm.
or utilizing your extensive network. At the end of the day, if you can't get in front of the people, or even worse, there's nothing out there to apply for, you're kind of just stuck,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Like there's nowhere to go when you can't reach for the doorknob and open the door to walk in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, with stage six, you talk about many people find that a layoff pushes them towards opportunities that they wouldn't have already considered otherwise, ones that much better match their values or long term visions. And this is quite literally the reason we started the podcast, which is laying the groundwork for our next phase of opportunities where we certainly would not have even considered them. Steve, it looks like reconstruction for you came in the form of realizing this long term dream of becoming an author. And I'd say that was a win.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I had pivots along the way. I liken it to like an oil tanker, that you make a very long, slow turn. So at one point, I pivoted from ad agencies to the client marketing side. I pivoted into sales business development at one point, and I pivoted into product marketing, which was a bit of a departure from more of my like marketing generalist roles. And
Hmm.
now here I am, author, writer, publisher. It's definitely been a journey, and I'm happy at where I'm at right now. And I think I look at it as someone with a growth mindset and a learning mindset, and try to just keep moving forward and keep reassessing and finding opportunity.
Yeah, I certainly agree that reconstruction looks different for everyone. I definitely think that there are multiple pivots that kind of get woven into and out of the scene as a whole. You referenced Vera Wang and Colonel Sanders and a handful of others, examples, real
Hmm.
life examples that readers can enjoy as they read this particular chapter. I'm going to say that I did not recognize a couple of the stories, so it gave me some learning opportunities. But sometimes I think people stay in the space where they are and just start at a new company, right? In the same field. Other times you might pivot for like a minute, like I know for me at one point I did pivot from mortgage banking to insurance. And while it's still under the financial services umbrella, so to speak, whoa, like it felt like a big pivot. And after about 2 years, I was just kind of like, I'm not feeling this. I need to kind of go back to where I came from because at that time, I wasn't in a mindset where I would have even been able to consider something along this line, right? So I would call that the big stretch.
Hmm.
And it feels like for the three of us, we've definitely taken the larger leap to explore, gotten uncomfortable, those types of things. It can be exciting, it can be daunting all at once, but it's great to be able to grow when you have the chance to do so. And Steve, honestly, us having this great opportunity to talk with you is actually it modified the vision that we had for this podcast because we realized there's not going to be this isn't going to be an ongoing podcast. This is a situational discussion right, that helps people at particular times in their lives. But, we've kind of been inspired to wrap up the podcast with a couple of additional interviews for people who have reinvented themselves, so to speak, whether it be after a layoff or following retirement. So that's been kind of a cool influence that you have had on us personally and on the original vision that we had for this. So thanks for that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So here we are at the final stage, renewal.
Hmm.
And what really, really jumped out to me for this stage was let renewal remind you that while setbacks are inevitable, so is the possibility of starting anew.
Hmm.
I thought that that was the perfect summation that you gave, just in general, not only for renewal, but for the experience as a whole. I felt like it was a very positive mindset that was filled with hope. It's absolutely fair to say that everyone's experience will be different. I mean, heck, even all three of our experiences are different. Imagine all the variations that are out there. But the real point is there is renewal, whatever that looks like on the horizon after a layoff.
Hmm.
So, Steve, I'm just going to say from my perspective that it was honestly wonderful to meet you, have the chance to review your book, even after two layoffs and a year into my second one, it spoke. It is right on point. It might not be a topic that people might automatically say, I want to go read this book. I would actually say the opposite. It's an easy read. It is not boring. It has humor and real life tools to help you. So, I'm just going to encourage everyone to please do it. And if you have a recent college grad, which I actually have a couple of friends who had kids graduate this May, and it's funny, I've called them up. Hey, how is your recent grad's job search going? And Steve, I'm sure it's no surprise to you. Guess what? They're having the same experiences that I am. So
Hmm.
I'm like, hey,
Hmm.
I want you to give them this book and it will help prepare them down the road.
Hmm.
So down the road, Steve, can you share any insights about any future plans and where you're going from here?
Thank you so much. My goal is to write another book, so I'm
Okay.
out promoting this one now, and I'll probably
Mhm.
keep promoting it for some time, and then I see another book in my future.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's exciting. I'm happy
yeah.
for you.
Thank you, thank you.
I look forward
Yeah,
to it. Steve, this was a great discussion and it was an honor to host you today. You've created a wonderful tool for people looking for answers and provided exercises of number one, identifying the emotions they're going through, but number two, that they want to work through and move past those emotions in a healthy way and just become better people. Steve, where can folks find your book or find out more about you?
thanks, thanks. So I hope everybody goes to Amazon and you can just search The Layoff Journey, and I hope everybody can check out the book. You can check out my website, thestevejaffe.com. You can learn more about me, learn more about the book. You can download a free chapter. So if you want to take a test drive before you make the purchase, you can get a free chapter. You can also find me on Instagram at Steve Jaffe, The Layoff Journey. I have a Substack page under Steve Jaffe, and you can find me on LinkedIn. So I'm in all the places. And I'd love to connect with anybody. If anybody's going through a layoff and it's particularly difficult, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help in any way I can. And thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we'll put all that stuff in the show notes, guys. Thanks so much for joining us for today's discussion, and we will see you guys next time.
Here's Steve.
Okay, thanks. Thank
See
you.
you. We want to thank you for listening to the Real Talk for Today's Job Seeker podcast with Mo and Joy. If you want to advertise and connect with our many listeners around the country, please reach out to us at realtalkfortodaysjobseeker@gmail.com. If you have any show topic, join us on our Facebook page to give us any recommendations and also to find out about upcoming shows. Thanks again for listening.